Hello and welcome to the 19th Annual Spring Literary Festival at Western Carolina University. My name is Jeremy Jones, and I'm the festival director. And we're joined tonight with Kristen Radtke. And in just a minute, we're gonna hear from Kristen. We're gonna play some games and ask her some questions. But before we start, a few notes. One is if you're watching us on our webpage, if you click through to YouTube, welcome to the 19th. Click through to YouTube. Hello and welcome to the 19th Annual Spring Literary Festival. My name is Jeremy Jones, and I'm the director of the festival. And we're joined tonight by Kristen Radtke. And in just a minute, we're going to hear from her, and we're going to play some games, and we're going to ask her some questions. Before we start, a few quick announcements. If you're watching on our webpage, if you click through to YouTube, you can join in the live chat. And you can ask Kristen questions there. So during the event, we'll pull your questions from YouTube and bring them to her. You'll also find a survey there, which will show up at the end of the night as well. If you're watching us live, if you'll fill out that survey, it will be great for future planning and also to thank some of our grant sponsors. If you're a student and you want those degree plus points, hang on at the end and scan your QR code. And lastly, if we were live like we intended to be tonight, we would leave the theater at the end of the night and go buy books. But we can't do that tonight, but you still can click on the link in YouTube to buy Kristen's books, buy her previous book, pre-order her forthcoming book from City Lights Bookstore, our great independent bookstore here in Silva. Tonight, we have some people to thank. The Spring Literary Festival receives support from the North Carolina Arts Council, a division of the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources. And it's funded in part by a grant from South Arts in partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts. This project is also made possible by funding from the North Carolina Humanities Council, a statewide nonprofit and affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And finally, the festival relies on support from the 2020-21 WCU campus theme Water, the Office of the Provost, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the English department. And tonight we're thrilled to have Kristen Radtke, the author of the graphic nonfiction book, Imagine Wanting Only This, and the forthcoming book, Seek You, A Journey Through American Loneliness, which is coming in July. She received the 2019 Whiting Creative Nonfiction Grant for that book, and not long after that book, her graphic novel, Terrible Men, will come into the world. She is the art director and deputy publisher of The Believer magazine, and her work has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Vogue, NPR, and many other places. So we're so grateful that she's here with us tonight. Everybody welcome Kristen Radtke.
Hey everybody, thanks so much, Jeremy. I wish we were all together in person, but I'm glad to be with you here in this space. Even if it seems like I'm here by myself, I'll trust that you're all out there.
I guess one question I have before we kind of move into some other things is about piecing all of these things together. I mean, I was struck, your last book, this book, it feels like all of these things are floating around and you start locking them together, sometimes through the panels, sometimes through language. And it feels so seamless to read, but cannot be that way behind the scenes, right? Like, how do you start understanding, is it a pretty organic process to learn that these things do fit together? Like your father's radio calls and like the monasteries of our mind, like all of these things start to fit together in a way that's so tidy, but I just wonder what that's like for you when you're working on it behind the scenes.
Terrible. I think like any writer, I mean, nothing is, if any writer, like, produces like their perfect manuscript on a first draft and understands all the relationships to each other, I don't want to ever meet that person. But I think like you're thinking about, like, we all have these obsessions and these things that we keep running over in our mind. And I think it takes us a long time to realize even sometimes that it's a part of the same project or that things are all related. Like when reviews for my first book said the book was about like loneliness and isolation, I was like, what do you mean? I had no idea that was like a theme in the first book, So I don't know. I think like I think often when we're centering around an idea for a long time, we have like, there's like, it's like this tornado of stuff all around it. And we don't know how they fit together until you kind of sat in your chair for enough time, which sometimes is many years. I mean, how does it work for you?
Well, I don't know. I was just thinking that requires us. I feel like there's this line that you have to walk as a writer where you have enough faith and enough doubt to sort of keep going. And I was just thinking that takes a lot of confidence, right? To trust the process, to like sit in that tornado and trust that the obsessions and the lingering questions do start to kind of slide together.
Do you think it's confidence?
I don't know, or faith. Like Richard Hugo talks about like following the music. Like that's how he talks about his process, is just trusting that the music will take him to truth. And I think for me, at least, it's like the connections that I feel like are there that don't seem like they make sense. And I think that's what pulls me to your work so much, is that you're like finding those unexpected connections that I don't think I could have found on my own, but I'm like so happy to have, like discovered them with you on the page, which feels, it feels like I've done some work. It's like, yes,
good.
I figured these things out. You know what I mean?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've ever like been driven to write by anything resembling confidence myself. I think it's like, I think I've actually had to give into the idea that like actually like sitting alone at your desk, like writing terrible sentences is like humiliating and embarrassing. And, but that part is also only for you. Like, I don't know, like, I think you can look at it like halfway through a draft and be like, this is terrible, I'm terrible. But it's like, you wouldn't build half a car and then be like, why won't this car start? Like it's not done until it's done. And then even then it's probably not really done.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm just thinking about how the car that I'm working on right now is like missing some really crucial parts. Well, here's what I'd like to do. Because you work with image and text so well, we wanted to do that very poorly in front of you. So I wanted to play Literary Pictionary, but I have a surprise guest who's going to join us to play this game. So we're welcoming Rachel Yoder, the author of the forthcoming novel Night Bitch, who is here to play Pictionary with us.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. Are you going to draw?
I am horribly going to draw, especially after what that absolutely like beautiful and refined reading. I became even more horrified that I had agreed to do this. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yay. I'm so happy you're here.
So here's how this will work. In just a moment, Rachel's going to bring up this beautiful whiteboard. And I'm going to ask you, Kristen, to close your eyes for just a second so that I can show the audience the clue. Not yet. I'll explain it, and then I'll make you close your eyes in front of us. We are going to ask Rachel to draw to draw sort of famous essay titles.
Okay.
So
then I'm going to be like it's going to be revealed when I'm a poorer read than you think I am, if I can't come up with them.
Well, I think, depending on how the drawings turn out, I'll probably feed you a hint. First, we'll start off by giving you the author, and then we'll go from there. How does that sound?
It's pretty much going to entirely be my fault when you don't get them. So just rest easy with that knowledge. Okay, should I bring up the whiteboard? Yeah,
so while Rachel brings up the whiteboard, I'll tell everyone out there that next year's literary festival, Rachel will be here with us to talk about.
Okay, are my eyes open or closed? I don't understand.
All right, so now, Kristen, will you close your eyes?
Okay. Oh, also, you should tell them about Rachel. Also.
Yes. So I will now show everyone and Rachel.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Can you see it? Okay. The clue, Kristen, you can open your eyes. And Rachel's gonna.
Is it timed or anything? No.
I don't know.
We've got this, Kristen. We're like, it's just like about telepathy. It's about like, whoa. Okay.
This is fun because I have
seeing like a torch or a candle.
I have no idea. Wow.
Death of a Moth.
Yeah.
I am really impressed. That was so fast.
You're amazing.
I was like, why are you drawing a birthday cake? And then it all came together. That was amazing. Okay. I'm gonna make quick work of this.
Let's see now.
Okay, should I close my eyes again?
Is there like a, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Kristen, close your eyes. Here is the second.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay, Kristen, you can open your eyes.
I feel like we're gonna get this. I feel like we're like off to a great start.
Killing,
like
shooting an elephant.
Yay!
Yeah. I was sold on you being terrible at this, Rachel, and
I swear like we didn't like coordinate or anything. It's just
wow.
Yeah, it's obviously like
this is fun. I could do this. Can I just do this instead of doing my job forever?
This is going to be your whole book tour.
Dictionary is the new reading.
Writers.
Yeah,
that's right. All right, are you ready for number 3?
Oh gosh. Okay.
This feels a little harder, maybe. All right, Kristen, we're ready for you.
Okay. I'm gonna take. Whoa, that's not what I meant at all. Okay, I'm gonna take a risk on this one. It's maybe gonna be a little bit more, detailed.
I see where you're going.
Goodbye to all that.
Yeah. Oh my god. This is ridiculous. I'm so impressed. You want to be like, so are you, your next books come out around the same time, right? Rachel, your book is out when?
Yeah, the same month.
Yeah, they're both in July.
We've just created a book tour event.
Yeah, I mean, we want to do something together in New York. So this is maybe what we're going to do.
Yeah, Kristen she's going to tell me all the tricks, how to publish a book. Okay. Yeah, you can look. Okay, so we have this, and then we have this.
Okay.
Lady, head, hair, lady, mother.
Lady head. I wish the ice cream music were back.
Mother's mouth. Mother tongue.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was good. I should have caught up to that a little sooner, I think.
I mean, it's good having like a telepathic partner in this game.
Truly. Yeah.
A lifelong bond really pulls you through in Pictionary is what I'm hearing. Okay, we have one more.
Okay, I didn't think we were going to get this far. I
thought it was going to take forever to do one, so I'm so impressed.
Oh, great. I think we've got this one.
All right, Kristen.
I mean, yeah. Okay.
Careful.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. What am I doing?
Oh, is this a butterfly? Oh, lobster. David Foster Wallace. Consider the lobster.
Yeah. Yay!
Yeah.
Sorry.
So impressive.
Is a little pornographic to begin. I'm so sorry. Okay.
You did a great job. Really, really beautiful. You just published a collection of graphic essays. Congratulations. That's all you need.
That's my next endeavor, is definitely just going to be drawing. It's my passion, as you can tell.
Yes. You did a great
job. This is a great moment, Kristen, maybe to tell us about the graphic or the workshop on Friday nights for comic.
Every Friday at the Believer, we host a different artist teaching us something about comics. So on Friday, we're gonna learn about drawing our pandemic future from Peter Quaish. So you should come.
And I feel like what just happened right now was that Rachel was trying out to lead a workshop on a Friday night.
She has attended before. She can attest to that. It's very fun.
Yeah, they're really excellent. My son and my husband have also attended, and yeah, it was really amazing to just take some time to draw, which I obviously never do. But it was really meditative and beautiful. So Kristen's whole series has been extraordinary. Yeah.
Should we tell people about Rachel's book?
Yeah, I was going to say, Rachel, tell us about your book, or Kristen, tell us about Rachel's book. that's coming into the world soon, very soon.
I mean, I want to hear Rachel talk about it.
Yeah, it's coming July 20th. It's called Night Bitch. I was not prepared to even give you a single sentence about it. So it's about a stay-at-home mom and who was once an aspiring artist, who finds that she may or may not be turning into a dog as she navigates motherhood and her own desires, her own fulfillment. Yeah. And it's
really good.
It's pretty wild. It's wild. I can't say that word. It's a little, unhinged, but I think a lot of us became unhinged, especially this past year. A lot of parents and came up against the sort of stuff that's being examined in the book. So
there is an appetite for unhinged right now. A really beautiful and terrifying cover, I think. And then a movie coming sometime into the world too, right?
Hopefully, yeah. I'm finishing up a revision of the script right now, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so excited.
But I'm so thrilled to share a publication month with Kristen. I loved your first book, and it was such a treat to be able to see this sneak peek. I couldn't imagine something even more beautiful than your first book. And it's just really gorgeous. So congrats.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And you said Rachel is coming to this festival next year?
To this festival next year, where hopefully we will be in person.
Well, good God, if we're not in person, we should just, I don't know what we should do. Something different.
Turn into dogs.
So yeah, turn into dogs. Yeah.
On a stage in front of us in March 2022.
Cool.
Something to look forward to, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for dropping by.
Thanks so much.
Rachel.
Nice to see you, Kristen.
You too.
I really thought that would take some time, but y'all were quick. So I have two students on the line, Stephanie Cook and Haley Wilkie, who have some questions for you. So we're going to bring them in so that they can talk with you a little bit about your work.
Cool. Hey, Stephanie and Haley.
Hey, did you intro us? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Yes, they're here, and Kristen is ready for you. So ask away. Anything?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being here and allowing us to interview you. I just wanted to kind of intro who we are, if Jeremy didn't, because I didn't hear it, but we're in his master's class right now for creative nonfiction. And we read your book, Imagine Wanting Only This year. And luckily, Haley and I got to look at a sneak peek of your book, Seek You, and we just absolutely loved it. So I'm going to let Haley go from here.
Hi, Haley.
So you did a really phenomenal job with your excerpt. I feel like that really touches on a lot of the aspects of the book in a really great cohesive way. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience, kind of more of a general overview about Seek You?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say, I didn't say profuse enough thanks in the beginning. Just thanks for putting this all on, y'all. The digital virtual events are there's so many things that can go wrong. It's so much stress. And then you're still just like in your apartment. So I really appreciate everything that goes into this. So thanks for doing such a great job. And for letting me play a game, because that is fun. I started writing about loneliness in 2016, right during the presidential election. I think it was a lonely time for a lot of us. And I, earlier, Jeremy and I were talking about how I guess loneliness has been a theme in some of my work, but I didn't really recognize that necessarily. But I'm interested, like once I started researching loneliness, I understood it in a way I didn't before. Like I never considered this something like the science of loneliness or like the biological imperative for, like how some people are biologically predisposed to be more lonely than others, or, things like that, and how dangerous loneliness really is, like chronic loneliness. Basically, like if you're chronically lonely, it inhibits your ability to like fight cancer and disease, you're more likely to have a heart attack, you're more likely to, a lot of things are much more likely to go wrong. And the fact that loneliness is reaching epidemic proportions. We're in a pandemic now, so epidemics seem like, small potatoes, but it's really a dangerous problem. The U.S. Surgeon General, former U.S. Surgeon General, called it the most dangerous health issue, like one of the most pressing health issues in America, and it's going up pretty rapidly. Certainly, this time has been like a very particular kind of loneliness, but the problems of loneliness and isolation have existed, for much longer than the pandemic, and they will persist after.
Thank you so much. Actually, my next question was going to be about themes of loneliness, but that kind of leads me to think about more of the research elements of your piece. Did you kind of start with kind of a conceptual image, or were they more, topics that came about organically? How did that process look like for you?
Yeah, so when I started that thinking about loneliness, like I said, in 2016, I started with a series of drawings, actually, where I was like being a real creep, and I was drawing strangers in public settings, because I was just like very interested in like sort of all the cliches about like being lonely in a crowded room, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think New York is a really interesting place, or cities in general are a really interesting place to observe people who are alone in a city that's, like absolutely packed with people, like kind of the way that we carve tiny little spaces of isolation out for ourselves in a place that's this congested. And it's also like offers you weird opportunities to observe, because everything is really anonymous. So it started with that, and I kind of thought that would be the project, or I was like, maybe I'll do a coffee table book of drawings. And, like, I think like the idea just sort of started to evolve. And then the more research I did, the more I was like, this is actually a really big problem, and this is really dangerous. And what does that mean? And like, then it was like, how is loneliness represented in romantic comedies? How is loneliness represented, on the news when we're talking about mass shooters? How is, like all of those things. So it's sort of just like, it took me down all of these different tracks, like how does loneliness change as we age? Like, are people who are single more lonely than people who are in relationships? It was this kind of like it just took all of these turns. And then when I started talking to people about loneliness, I was just like amazed at how beautiful their stories were and how vulnerable they were. And so it sort of just took on a life of its own, I think.
Thank you. That is really, really cool. Stephanie, do you have another question?
Yeah, I think, Kristen, you did such a good job illustrating for our class this concept that Jeremy keeps pushing, this term of like approaching a topic from so many different angles. And so just reading your work really helped me kind of see that in play. I want to focus a little bit on the images for a second. So in Imagine Wanting Only This, it felt a lot more like a traditional graphic novel where you had like different panels laid out on the page. Whereas in Seek You, it's almost fully like full page illustrations. Yeah. And so I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit maybe about how your style has changed between the two, and if you tailor the style to each concept that you're working on.
That's a really good question. I do not know how that happened. Like I cannot even remind myself about, like, I can't even conjure a memory of why I decided not to draw this book in traditional panels. I don't know. It just sort of happened. But I knew I wanted to draw CQ differently. Like I knew I wanted to work with color in some way. Early drafts were like in black and white, but with like a hint of color. Like if I was drawing like you, I would draw you all in black and white, but then maybe like your shirt would be in purple or something like that. Like, and then over time, I'd be like, color is really its own language, and I had to learn it. That was really hard, but it was also like pleasurable in a way. But I don't know, I think like these kinds of things sort of evolve. And I think sometimes when we set out to be like, this is how I will make this project, I think it's kind of like voice, like images are like, there's a visual voice to things, but it's like you set out to be like, this is the kind of piece I'm going to make. This is like maybe that's the idea you need to get yourself into the project. But hopefully then like hopefully you're in conversation with it as you're making it. And then you let it morph and maybe it becomes something bigger or totally different than what you imagined.
It's actually really encouraging to hear you talk about the process. It's just like coming to you, because that's how I feel like I write also.
Good.
I just wanted to do a follow-up, I guess, on color, because I was really drawn to the way that you use color in CQ, and you have these different sections in your book, and each section kind of has its own color that goes with it. And they're also like all these like really muted kind of lonely colors. And so I was just wondering if, you talked about it briefly, but can you talk a little bit about how you chose these specific colors, and maybe why you chose to do each section with its own unique color?
Yeah. I don't know. Again, like I don't really know how I mean, I know. So like when I started researching color, I got like all of these books about like color theory. I like signed up for a color theory class at like a local college in Brooklyn. And then I like went to one session and was like, they were just like, we're going to mix paint for a semester. And I was like, nah. And I never went back to that class, but that, like maybe I should have, like, maybe I would have learned something, but I read a lot about color and how like color interacts with each other, and like how a mood can change when you put one color in juxtaposition to another color. But it just took time. And like, I spent a lot of time like looking at color palettes, like on the internet, and figuring out like how things go together, and how like, it's very rare for me that I can just come up with a color combination in my mind and then start like, and by rare, I mean, I literally never do it. Like I would never go into like Adobe Illustrator and like select a color and start drawing. Like I start by doing like research and looking at colors, or like selecting colors from like places around me in that way. So, and then like sometimes it was just, sometimes it was just about, well, I did like 2 kind of bluish sections. I guess I got to figure out something else. And then sometimes when I was talking more, there's a section that's more, that's about touch, and I wanted to do something there that was like maybe like a more intimate color, so I did like some browns and pinks for that. But like none of it was like a rule. Like I just don't know color enough to even like know why I responded to the colors that I responded to.
I think it was powerful for me as a reader, at least, how the colors work. So whatever you did, you did well. Haley, you got one?
Yeah, and I'll just echo with that. I completely agree. I loved color schemes. Kind of going back to this conversation about kind of writing something that becomes bigger than itself, or taking different twists and turns that are unexpected. I don't know how like spoilery you want to get, but was there anything with CQ that surprised you? Like you hadn't intended for it to take that direction, and it just kind of organically went there?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the first most obvious one is that I spent 3 years writing about loneliness, and then the entire world shut down, and people are like lonelier than they've ever been. So like even that intro that I read, which is from the beginning of the book, I wrote a new intro. I wrote like sort of like a prologue to the book about COVID, but like talking about like crowded subways and stuff like that, like, that's still the reality for a lot of us, but it's not been the reality for a lot of us also for, over a year. But I think like the ending, which is what I read in the second half of the reading, the stuff that was in that kind of that pink color palette, like I didn't the radio was so important to me in my adolescence. And it wasn't until like, that was the last thing. I was at a residency, I don't know, in 2019. And that was really the last thing that I wrote for the book. And I didn't find that until the end of the process. And I had one of the first scenes I ever wrote was the thing about my dad and the radio. And it was like, I just never made the connection to the fact that those things were so interrelated, like kind of asking I think we have this idea that, so like, for example, like with loneliness studies, a lot of scientists are always like blaming technology and saying like, okay, well, like at each technological advancement, we're like getting more separate and removed from each other. And I think in some ways that's probably true. Like Instagram probably isn't great for our interpersonal relationships or for our mental health. But we've also like, I also think that technology is kind of an easy scapegoat. Like, I don't know if my dad was my dad more lonely than I was, 30 years before, when he was like calling out on CQ radio, on ham radio, than I was when I was like, logging onto the internet for the first time. Like, I don't know. So I think, but I had to write into that for a couple of years before I even started like asking those questions.
I related a lot to the logging into the internet kind of scene, because I think we were probably right around the same age and the same experience. I was really interested in how you used senses in the book to structure your your whole narrative. So it starts with sound, and then it moves to kind of like visual, and then to touch, and then it ends up kind of back at sound again. And I was just wondering, is this something you knew you were going to do when you went in? Is this something that your research kind of moved you towards? How did the structure of this book come about?
Yeah, I didn't know that at all. I think they were like numbered sections or something, or I don't even know if I had sections. It really wasn't until the book was almost fully formed that I understood it already had this sort of organic organizing principle. I just hadn't labeled it as such. So I think like I try to resist that. Like, I think like I've spent so much time wasted on each of my book projects trying to figure out what the final shape would be. And I think there's part of that that's necessary, is kind of figuring out even like what information needs to be included, or like what narrative arcs are, or whatever. But I also think sometimes like you're trying to build the shape of something before you even have like the guts of it. And so you're like, it's like you're just like you're spinning your wheels in some way. So one of the things I did, not to say I succeeded in this book, but one of the things I kept reminding myself was to just let the shape find its, like, knowing that I would find the structure later. And it was just about like, just keep writing it, just keep drawing it, like figure out that stuff later. So no, I didn't figure that out until like really probably a couple months before I turned the book in.
Oh, one more. Do you want to ask anything, Stephanie?
Yeah, we could ask one about kind of publishing. We had a question about the difference between publishing a book that's purely text versus publishing a book that has visuals as well, and how it's really standard for publishers to kind of come back with edits for your text, but where the visual arts, it's more of like a finished product usually that an artist presents. So we just wanted to know a little bit more about the process of publishing, and like, did your editors ask you to change images? And if so, like, how did that work?
Sometimes, not as much as the text. They definitely ask for some of those changes. And I think actually like one of the disadvantages that, like, I think, not speaking about my editor at all, but in general, like, I think one of the disadvantages that publishing does to artists is that they don't edit the images as intensely as they edit the text. And so like, I definitely didn't present finished images when I presented drafts, like they changed a lot. And like, for example, with my artists who I work with, The Believer, like they submit sketches and storyboards and all this stuff so that we work out the framing and stuff like that together. And sometimes they don't need me at all, but it's helpful to see kind of like, the visual identity of a piece as it goes along. But like, just because I finish a drawing and like color it and think it's like perfect and done doesn't mean that can't get cut in the same way that like a sentence that I also loved while I was writing it, or I don't love anything while I was writing it, but in retrospect, like thinking this is finished, like, I think you have to be willing to throw anything away, even if you've spent, forever working on it, or seemingly forever.
Is text or image harder to throw away, or does it just depend?
It's a good question. I think I don't care if I have to throw something away, as long as I know I'm still getting where I need to go. Like if I had to throw away like a whole book project, like I probably wouldn't get out of bed for a few days, but because that's just a bummer to think about, like all of the time I could have been like drinking and having fun and like watching television, or like being with my friends. And but I think like as long as it's in service of a goal, then I'm fine with it. Like, as long as I know the piece is still going to exist. But like, thinking about like the next book I'm working on, I'm thinking about deleting like a huge portion of it, and thinking about like how I figured out the exact narrative arc I thought it was going to be. And then I spent like a month drawing all of that stuff, like for 12 hours a day. Like that is not a great feeling. So I think like the writing feels like more labor, because it is just like execution at a certain point. It feels like less creative sometimes than the writing. Because you're just like, once you know what you're going to draw, it's like, I know if I'm going to draw you talking to me, Jeremy, if I'm going to draw that, like it takes work to figure out how that's going to be framed. But then after that, it's just like, how do I make this drawing look like Jeremy? How do I make this drawing look like me? So that part of it is just like, it's a drag in the same way that like, if you built like anything like physical with your hands, then you had to take it apart. It's just a drag.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie and Haley, thank you so much for these thoughtful questions and for joining in the conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, Jeremy.
Really good to see you.
So, Kristen, I have some questions from the interwebs that I wanted to bring to you. Someone wanted to know, I think this is a really good question. You don't necessarily have to name the book, I don't guess, but they wanted to know if you've ever read a book that was really bad that you didn't like, but you learned a lot from.
Interesting. Probably. I think I've read books that I thought I really like. I can think of one book that I'm not going to name that I really hated, and then I read it again like a year later. Like I couldn't get into it, and I thought it was just garbage. And then I read it again, and it was like fantastic, and it was really useful for the making of CQ. But I think sometimes you can see something. I think like comics are different than writing for me in that like you're looking at comics in like a very visual way, so you can see like very clearly, okay, if I'm drawing this person like walking down the stairs, I can see like what panels I wish that an artist had drawn. So I think maybe in that way it's really helpful. Like when I see like missed opportunities, because they're just so much more, they're literally more visible in comics than they are in prose. But
Yeah,
that's a really interesting question. What about you, Jeremy?
Well, no, I was just thinking there's something like for me, a writing workshop is so much about learning how to think through problems of a draft that often that's not yours, because you can have some objectivity about it. And I guess you can do the same thing with books, right? You can find the problems or the missed opportunities. And I think that's really, it can be teachable.
I think so, but it's kind of like giving advice to your friends, right? It's like the same as, it's different. Like you could be a really good, I consider myself a very good advice giver, but I'm not necessarily very good at implementing, other people's advice into my own life, even when it's excellent advice. So I feel like, I don't know, like I'd have to think about that question for a long time, I think, about whether or not, like, I think it's very easy to read a book and like feel like I would have done that better, but like, would you have, like, I don't know. It's very easy to look at a finished product and not see all of the mess that, all of the steps that went into it. Kind of like the way we've been discussing of the messiness of that process.
Yeah, I think that's true. Someone wants to know if people who show up in your books, people that you've drawn or you portrayed in some way, how they've reacted to you putting them on the page, both in image or text, and sharing their stories.
It's been a real mixture. I think like sometimes the things that you're worried, like I feel like I've had a lot of students who ask this question of like, I'm afraid to write about my family or this really painful thing that happened to me and I don't know how someone's going to react. And I think it's really common for that to hold us back in the beginning. And I always like try to remind people there's a difference between writing something and publishing it, and you can decide later. And I think sometimes you're going to decide the wrong thing. And then you just have to work through that. But I think in other, sometimes I've been really worried about how a certain person will react. And then they've just been like, that's me. That's so cool. I feel like it's just really hard to know how someone's going to feel.
I should have said too, it was so great. The excerpt that you read, one of those images is our image for the festival this year. In fact, I will show everybody. So this is your dad, right?
My dad. Well, it's like it's a cartoony version of my dad. Like I didn't really draw it from a picture of my dad, but
it's your imagined.
It's supposed to be my small child dad.
Yeah. So I guess at what point, or do you show any of the work to the people that you're writing or drawing in draft form?
I think that's a question too that everybody has to decide for themselves. Like in this particular book, like this book is like I dedicated this book to my dad. I don't know if he knows that yet, but he hasn't seen. I talked to him about the process a lot, but he hasn't seen any of it. But I also felt like he would be comfortable with everything that I included. So I think that's really hard. I think like if you're like revealing, like in journalism, you're never supposed to show your sources the piece before it comes out, because then they're going to want to change things. I don't know that that's always the best policy for creative work. I think it's like I think that for me, the rules are always shifting. And like for each project, it's just really different.
Yeah. I think that, it's always remarkable how people react in such unexpected ways to seeing themselves on the page, like the things that you're most worried about sometimes don't even cross their minds, right? But the most minor things are the things that rub them the wrong way. Totally. So I hear that. Someone wants to know about the title for Imagine Wanting Only This and where it came from, at what point it kind of arrived.
Sorry, my husband keeps opening the door, so I just had to clear it down.
Come on in.
Anyway, sorry.
So yeah, about the title for Imagine Wanting Only This.
How it came to be?
Yeah, where it came from.
So that was, speaking of nothing related to this at all, but I was thinking a little bit about what you said about like how you never know how people are going to react. So I guess this is an anecdote like that, but I was dating this person years ago who was very terrible, and I knew I was going to break up with him. And we were like talking about ideas or like titles for the book, and he was like, oh yeah, like what about Imagine Wanting Only This? And I was like, damn it, I think that's probably the title, and you're terrible, and I'm gonna break up with you, and then like forever that title is gonna be associated with my book. But then like years later, I found an early list that I had made myself where it was on the list, and I had just like thrown it away, and I needed somebody else to say it to me. So I guess it was an idea that I had early, but I needed someone else to say it to me before I could sort of recognize it.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere, but I'm not sure.
Somewhere. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Wow, that's really fascinating. So it was very early on.
It was late. It was well after I sold the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it was like, it was cold. I did that thing that you do where you like go through and like find little phrases, that you're like, maybe that could be the title.
Yeah.
How are titles for you? Are they hard for you or are they easy?
I feel like it's a project by project thing. Sometimes it's the title that is the like catalyst, it's like the thing that is going to be a framing. But sometimes, it comes much later and it's really hard. I feel like subtitles are with my last book, I feel like we fought about the subtitle for like an unnecessary amount of time. It was like 3 weeks going back and forth about subtitles.
With your publisher?
My publisher had an opinion, my agent had an opinion, but none of us were on the same page.
I've been a part of, as a former working and publishing person, we were a part of many of those conversations. It's very familiar.
And I feel like at some point, you're thinking about it both from like who's going to pick the book up on a shelf and what's it going to tell them, and also like what the book's about, like the sort of project and the product. So that's sometimes hard. This question, I think you maybe already answered a little bit, but have people ever drawn conclusions from your work that you don't agree with, or took meanings from your work that you didn't mean to convey?
Definitely. Yes.
And that's just part of art, right? Like once you create it and put it in the world, it takes on its own life.
Yeah. I mean, like there's a part of it where it's like, I think one of the hard parts about writing nonfiction is that you're creating a character of yourself, and then someone feels like they know you and they have a right to sort of comment on like things like your decision making or something that feels bad. I think especially it happens a lot for women writers. And it just feels like confusing and a little strange. And I also think when you're trying to write yourself in a complex way, which is to say like that you're not a hero because you're not, if you write yourself making bad choices or mistakes, people can really latch onto that. And I think that can be really difficult. And I think it's one of the reasons that I wanted to sell my next book as a novel, because it was just like, it just kind of wore me down.
Yeah.
But I think also sometimes the great thing about readers is that they also just they discover things about your book that you didn't really realize that you've done. And you can learn from those, both positive and negative.
Yeah. So one thing I was wondering, and I wanted to ask you, is if you feel like CQ is a hopeful book.
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you think it is?
I think, even like I had that thought already, but then hearing you read the excerpts that you read tonight, I was like, yeah, this book is full of hope. And I wondered about your last book, Imagine Wanting Only This. Do you feel like that is a hopeful book?
I thought so. A lot of people didn't seem to think so. In some ways, I think this is a more hopeful book than Imagine was, because I feel like loneliness is really important. And I feel like I think we spend a lot of time trying to not feel lonely, because feeling lonely feels really bad. But we're also like, loneliness is really important because it's just like when we're hungry or something, we need to go have food. Like loneliness is telling us that we need to fix something, or we need to reach out to someone or make some changes. So I think actually it's really valuable and something we should listen to. And it's also so universal, like who hasn't felt lonely? So I think that, I mean, truly, I feel like if we listen to it, we can find our way back to each other. Like we can be closer than we were before, and give each other what we need. I mean, it's kind of like a mutual aid thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just my like pandemic.
No, I mean, I feel like when I read the book, it was like both a gut punch and like a back pat, you know, it was like feel all these emotions and then get back out there. Which felt really hopeful. Like, I think that this story that I tell a lot about hope is, and this was like around the same time you were probably writing the book in 2016, I had an opportunity to spend like a week with the writer Wendell Berry. And I was like asking him all these big existential questions, and he was like, just wanted to tell jokes. But at some point I like pinned him down. I was like, how can we be hopeful? And he was like, I don't care about hope. And I was like, wait, what?
Wow. Why not?
Basically, he said that we live in, this is his line, a cult of the future, that we're all obsessed with the future and all of the ways things can go wrong. And it's too easy to have false hopes. And so hope can sort of like lead you astray and lead you into this like, I don't know, catastrophizing about everything. And so he was saying that you need to just do what you can around you, you know? And I was thinking about, and I forget where this piece was, about your seedlings and your like giving plants away, like the things that you can do in the community around you. Like that's the work you should do and not worry about all of these other things. And so something about, I think, your book and thinking about like what loneliness gives us to then take into the world around us and not worry about these things we can't control.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to not worry about things I can't control. Like I should go talk to Wendell because I don't have a clue. Yeah. But I think it's true that I think all of that is true for sure. But I think they're also not mutually exclusive, you know? Like, I think we can also like paying attention to the present and like taking care of each other now is like how we build towards something better, which is in the future, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's great. I think that's a great place to end our conversation too, because your book, like, again, it sort of charts this loneliness as a way of saying, almost as a kind of like litmus test for what you believe in and what you should do and what you want and all your desires. So when it's out in the world in July, everyone, go buy it. You can click down below and pre-order it. Kristen, we were so glad to have you here and to hear you. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. This was really a nice night.